Alright, give me a second to get set up and get the timer on. And hey, it's less scary this year because we're not live streaming things. Could be worse. I'll give you a 1 minute warning with your opening statement by just holding up one finger.
Is that 1 minute, like I've been talking for 1 minute? Or
That
is
is,
1 minute?
you have 1 minute remaining.
Okay.
Would you feel less nervous if you know who I was?
Oh yes, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Please introduce yourself. Or would it make you more nervous?
I work in the upper school. My name is Dr. McElroy.
He's very nice and hasn't bitten anyone in several years. All right, Brandon, you may begin.
In 1839, British novelist and playwright Edward Lytton wrote, "Beneath the rule of men entirely great, the pen is mightier than the sword." He wrote this in his historical play Cardinal Richelieu. To me, the pen or word, it represents the idea, and the sword represents any direct violence or brute force. I truly believe that the idea would surpass any form of violence. This statement applies to the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr. had ideas and changes for the civil rights. He had experienced firsthand the harsh conditions that the minority of society were put through. He strongly believed that the minority should be treated the same way the majority was. He used his word to spread the idea. People were also out there using violence to try to stop him. They were against his ideas and wanted to get rid of them. Eventually, Martin Luther King was shot and killed, but his idea lived on and his followers accomplished his dream. The idea surpassed even death by sword. That is why idea is so much more mighty than the sword. Martin Luther King, similar to MLK, also had opinions on the things that he thought were wrong. He believed that some rules in church were incorrect, so he went out and wrote 95 changes for church in a book and shared it with his community. His powerful words moved everyone around him, and if he had instead used direct violence, he would have simply scared everyone, and eventually died to the guillotine for rebellion. His powerful words were much more successful than brute force, and to this day, his changes still come into play. World War I was classified as one of the deadliest conflicts in world history. There were over 38 million casualties, yet people still fought for what they thought was right. Why were they not afraid of the consequences? That is through their idea. Army and direct violence are a tool to achieve an idea. Without idea, the men have no reason to fight. The idea is so powerful it surpasses any fear of death. This is similar to the reason why we argue. Why do we argue, or why do we use direct violence? Because we are enraged by something that someone said or did, an idea. And if someone like a bully punches you or stuffs you in a locker, you feel the pain, but by the next day, the pain goes away and you forget about it. On the other hand, if someone uses hurtful language in a serious way towards you, you cannot forget about it very easily. And even if you laugh it off or play it cool, it truly does hurt. And when the person that used hurtful language comes back the next day, you don't feel the same way about them. Words have a serious mental implant when they are said, never to be taken away. American novelist Jack Canfield said, quote, "One individual can begin a movement that turns the tide of history." Martin Luther King in the Civil Rights Movement, Mahatma Gandhi in India, Nelson Mandela in Africa are examples of people standing up with the courage and nonviolence to bring about needed changes. End quote. People have tried to accomplish...
Thank you. So, Brandon, you come up and ask
Oh,
questions.
yeah. My bad. Wait, she's at...
I'm sorry, Claire asked questions. Sorry. You're right. Process happens now. So, negative is giving questions, affirmative is receiving them. Okay? You may begin.
Do you think that the pen is the answer to every situation?
No, it's the cause.
In Animal Farm, do you think Mr. Jones would have listened if the animals had used diplomacy?
Define diplomacy.
Rational speaking, I guess. Like,
Yes.
okay, so you're saying that if the animals had asked him, "Please don't kill me, I don't want to die," would he have responded positively?
No, it's more of how you go up to him and talk to him. Like if you can, like how the pigs convinced everyone else that like the like for example that they like forgot, and the seven commandments were actually like different, and how they convinced the animals that they were different and they had just forgotten. Right, so I think the pigs, if they had come up and tried to convince Mr. Jones instead of just asking and pleading for life, they should have came up to him with like more forceful way and said like a respectful and forceful way and asked him like why he was doing it and he shouldn't be, and convince him to stop.
Okay, moving on. When you're dealing with a radical adversary, say ISIS.
Reminder to look forward and not into
Oh, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Do you think negotiating with diplomacy is going to persuade them more than force?
We have tried to talk to ISIS about what the things to do when we tried to negotiate with them, but honestly I don't think it's a good idea to go back with brute force, because a lot of you probably heard the quote that 2 wrongs don't make a right. So it doesn't make sense for us to like go back and bomb ISIS because they bombed someone else. I think it would be better if we tried to solve the issue instead of creating more.
Yes, but ISIS is a group.
Thank you. All right, Brandon, you can have a seat. Claire, you'll do your opening statement. You may begin.
There were many great people and leaders in history, and they all changed the world using either the power of the pen or the power of the sword. Many people have argued that the pen is mightier than the sword. However, I do not agree with this statement. In this debate, we aren't talking about which power is good or bad. We're talking about which is going to leave more of an impact in the world, and I'm certain that the sword is mightier. Going through an experience is more impactful than learning or reading about it. In World War I, upwards of 17 million people died. That's over double the current population of New York City. Soldiers were sent into battle and forced to witness the horrors of the bloodiest war in history, leading them to develop post-traumatic stress disorder. In watching their fellow soldiers become injured and killed by the harsh reality of battle, men were permanently scarred, both physically and emotionally. Pacifists drafted into service were forced to witness firsthand the very principles they objected. Living through a situation is far more impactful than reading a statistic on a piece of paper. In George Orwell's novel Animal Farm, the animals had protested against their leader, Mr. Jones, and driven him out, but soon after they received word that he was returning with a small army of men. Although the animals had prepared for a battle scenario, they didn't know the exact date of when the battle was going to happen, forcing them to take action when Jones was on the way. Although they came prepared, it was not planning the battle, but actually experiencing and winning the battle that established pride and nationalism within their newly formed community. Physically experiencing an event is more powerful than reading an account of the same event, showing how the sword is mightier than the pen. People that took initiative using the power of the sword made more of an impact on the world. Before World War I, the Berlin Conference took place, where countries proposed their land requests and took control over parts of Africa. Africans were being controlled by themselves through local dynasties. The Europeans were concerned the existing countries and dynasties in Africa would refuse to supply them with resources. It is not through the negotiations of the Berlin Conference, but by physically entering Africa and establishing their presence with advanced technological and military power that European countries were able to gain control. Through their actions, countries not only increased the flow of natural resources to Europe, but also created new countries and demarcations that left a lasting impact on the geopolitical boundaries of present-day Africa. This shows that people that took initiative, even if they were controlling other countries, made a mighty impact on the world without using the power of the pen. The Mongols controlled an enormous amount of land. At its height, they controlled the largest land empire in history, spanning 12 million square miles, about the size of Africa. The Mongols made an enormous impact on the trade network, and they did this with no written language. It was with brute force and persuasion that the Mongols established this monstrous empire, re-establishing the power of the sword, whether it be pure violence or initiative. As you have witnessed, many people in history have demonstrated that channeling the forces of power, initiative, and direction will reveal that the sword is in fact mightier than the pen. As famed World War II General Douglas MacArthur stated, "Whoever said the pen is mightier than the sword obviously never encountered automatic weapons." Thank you. I now stand ready for cross-examination.
Reminder to look forward. Reminder to look forward.
Okay, yeah.
You may begin.
Do you believe that the sword would not exist without an idea?
No.
So then, do you think the sword is a way to achieve an idea?
I think that the sword is the way to achieve a solution.
But how do you think of a solution?
A solution is the end to a dispute, and usually that most of the time can be solved using the power of the sword. It leaves more of an impact on people.
So you're saying that taking action is more important than thinking of the action first.
No, I'm saying that taking action will leave more of an impact and it will help move things forward quicker.
So do you think that Martin Luther King Jr. and Martin Luther would have accomplished more if they had an army by their side?
Yes, I do think that. And
How
they did
so?
technically have an army by their side. Although it wasn't a physical army, it was an army of people that were ready to take action.
But how did he achieve that army? Through his spoken words and his nonviolence. So, so the idea can come up with the sword, and the sword exists when the idea is created. For example, if you wanted to become, I don't know, a good dancer in your case, you would want to be a good dancer. So you would go out and you would go, I don't know, learn to dance, I guess, right?
Yes, but you have to do the action, and that's what makes you better.
But if you didn't want to be a good dancer, you would never go out and go do it.
No, but I mean the idea it has no meaning unless it's acted upon.
All right, thank you very much. You have 1 minute to prepare your closing statement. Folks in the audience, a reminder, there should be no talking. All right, affirmative, you'll have 1 minute to make your closing statement.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay. As I've said before, the pen is mightier than the sword, or idea is mightier than brute force. Martin Luther King had a great impact on the world, but the Martin Luthers had a great impact on the world, even though they started with no army. The pen, or idea, is much more powerful than the action. Without idea, my opponent said there would be no sword, which means that the idea is mightier. There would be no action without idea. The idea and word surpasses all, for it is the final destination and the bright beginning for all. The rule of men entirely great, the pen is mightier than the sword. Thank you.
Thank you. You may begin.
The sword has much mightier impacts on people than the pen from the arguments I have provided. Experiencing an activity is more impactful than learning or reading about it. The soldiers in World War I were clearly more heavily impacted from post-traumatic stress disorder, which came from the sword, than their families, who simply read about their efforts in the newspapers. People that took initiative using the power of the sword made more of an impact on the world today. The conquests of Africa made a lasting change in demarcations and boundaries of Africa today. My opponent said that Martin Luther King Jr. made an impact through written words. However, if he had used the power of the sword, it would have made more of an impact, because an idea, it doesn't have as much of an impact unless it is put into action. As human rights activist Malcolm X once said, So early in my life, I had learned that if you want something, you had better make some noise. Thank you.
Alright, thank you very much. Let's have a hand for both our debaters. Well done. It's always challenging to be the people to go first. So, you all can have a seat. Next group of folks, come on up.